Everybody, thank you very much for coming out in this nice, beautiful, clear evening. We won't talk temperature, though. If you would be kind enough to join me with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And thank you. Okay, before we get started with the presentation of the proposed 2019 and 2020 school budget, just a few notes. We will be having several presentations throughout the evenings, and then next week we will have our quote deliberations on the budget adopted by this board. Generally speaking, we will be doing our very best to recess at 10 o'clock every evening. We do have a lot of people that need to get up and work and perhaps shovel some snow. So let's bear that in mind. So with that being said, I'm going to introduce you Dr. Tracy for the superintendent's proposed budget.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to start off with some other thanks to our principals, my central office colleagues, and in particular, I want to thank Anthony for burning the midnight oil, and I mean that literally, for weeks and weeks to make sure all the numbers add up and make sure that everything sticks together the way it's supposed to. So thank you, Anthony, and everybody else who has been working for a couple of months to consider what they think the schools require, what the costs ought to be, where we can save a buck, and to bring us to this point tonight. I also want to thank the Board of Education in advance for all the hours that you're about to spend trying to wrap your mind around these numbers and to come out by the end of next week with what you believe is a worthy budget for the public schools in our community. So thank you to all. I'm going to take about 15 minutes and give you an overview of the budget document that you see before you. Happy to take questions as we go along, although I know you understand that the folks with the detail are going to be coming before you over the next 3 evenings, so you probably want to save your big questions for them. But if you have any quick thoughts or clarifications as I go through, please interrupt and let me know. After that, Alicia and our elementary principals are going to talk about the budgets for Hill and Plain School, for Northville School, and for Sarah Noble. And I do want to extend regrets on behalf of Pat Corvello. She had some kind of household emergency, as in flooded out, frozen pipes, leaky, something that could only be dealt with tonight. The guys that are willing to do that were booked up, and they said, if you want us to come over, it's going to be tonight. So she sends her regrets, and if there are questions specifically for her that the rest of us can't answer tonight, we'll have her back another night. With that, let's jump in. Let's start with the students. That's why we're here. You'll see that we're projecting a total enrollment next year of 3,923 students. That's a decline of 45 over the current year number, and the current year number was calculated on October 1st, which is, as you know, is the official enrollment day. Our elementary, intermediate, and middle schools are all projected to decline somewhat, especially at the Schaghticoke level, but the high school is expected to grow by 26 students. So that's the student population that we were thinking about and planning for throughout this budget process. I had 4 priorities in my mind as I worked through with my colleagues to put this document together for you. Number 1 is, what do we need to do to attract and develop and retain top talent? Most especially amongst our teaching force and our administrators who lead our schools and work directly with young people. If we don't get that right, everything else is an uphill battle. So that's number 1. Second, improving instruction. What happens in those classrooms and the ability of our teachers to deliver instruction in an engaging and productive way, it has a huge impact on student achievement and student well-being. So we need to pay attention to that. Third, enhancing special education services. You'll see as we get deeper into this that even though our overall enrollment is drifting downward over the years, our special ed enrollment has actually been going up. And so we need to make sure that we're keeping faith with these youngsters and supporting our school teachers and school leaders in this very important and demanding area. And then finally, protecting our investment in facilities. This town has invested untold millions of dollars in this building and the other facilities that our youngsters rely upon every day. And we need to make sure we take care of that and that they're ready to go every morning with the heat on for the youngsters that come in. So that's just a background to how I think about this. The current year's budget is a little over $63 million. My suggestion to you is that next year we be at $65,065,000 and change. That's an increase of a little over $2 million from your current year. In percentage terms, about 3.26%. So where's the $2 million going? Why do we need more money? A variety of directions. About 22% of that increase will go to teacher salaries. About 24% will go to the salaries of non-teaching personnel. Benefits takes up about 15%. Transportation, regular and special ed, about 11%. And you see on down the line amongst expenses. And then there are some revenue impacts here. We are expecting less from the state in terms of excess costs, special education revenue. So that's a hit of about $184,000. This budget eliminates pay for play, and if we say goodbye to those dollars, that's about $110,000 that you will not see. And then about $17,000 of other revenue that Anthony will talk about when his turn comes up later in the process. So if you're looking to see where the increase would be going, that's where it would be going. Something that hasn't changed since I was here back in the previous century is that this school system delivers solid economic value to the citizens and the taxpayers of this town. I did a little research to bring myself up to date, and I counted in the latest State Education Department report 171 towns and regional school districts in this state, out of which New Milford ranks 151st in terms of per pupil spending. And this is a complicated calculation that the state does. It's something that they call net current expenditures per pupil. It's an apples-to-apples analysis they do of every school district in the state, and we rank 151st, which means if you were looking for a town that spent less money per pupil, you'd only find 20 of them in the whole state whose number is lower than New Milford. So I recognize nobody likes taxes and nobody wants to see expenses go up, but this school system traditionally and for decades has run a very fine program on a very efficient base. So I think that's worth remembering as we talk to each other and as ultimately we talk to town officials and the voters. In keeping with the goal of attracting and retaining quality teachers, I took a look at the salary schedules of half a dozen towns around us here. This is current year. We were able to get this from the towns that are listed. You'll notice that when it comes to starting teachers, somebody with a bachelor's degree and no experience, we're actually pretty close to the top. Bethel's a little bit ahead of us, but we're pretty close to the top in terms of attracting new teachers. By the time you get to the master's column, down around step 5, we're close to the bottom. And that's true, again, when it comes to folks who've gone on to get their 6th year and they've been here 12, 13, 14 years. So we need to keep that in mind, and we need to be figuring out how are we going to remain competitive so that people want to come here and they want to stay here. This budget devotes about $449,000 to increase teacher salaries. As you know, this board did approve a new contract with the Teachers Association that will take effect next year, and this budget fully funds that agreement. I can tell you that the increases all told add up to about 3%. A similar story as what you'll hear around this part of the state in terms of increasing compensation to faculty members. And as I said before, it's important that we remain competitive so that we attract and hold good people here in our classrooms. I'm going to talk about class sizes over the next few slides, and I just want to recall that in our contract with the CEA New Milford, there are guidelines. And the guidelines state that at the pre-K through 5 level, we should be shooting for an average of 25 students per class. And at the middle and high school levels, a teacher who typically teaches 5 classes would have a total of either up from 100 to 125 students. So that works out to 20 to 25 students in a secondary classroom. We're actually going to do better than that in this budget, as you have in the past. Here's the picture for Hill and Plain School. Now, in this school, I am recommending that we delete 3 sections, 3 regular teaching positions, because the school's enrollment has been declining of late. You know that the enrollment growth that we've seen at the primary level has been mostly in the north end of town. So you see the numbers of sections recommended here. That represents a reduction of 3 over the current year. And you see the average class sizes that would result from those projected enrollments. Even with that reduction, Hill and Plain will have a slightly smaller average class size than will Northville. The average at Hill and Plain under this plan will be 17.8, and the average at Northville will be 18.2. So close, with Hill and Plain slightly on the smaller side. Here at Northville, I'm recommending no change in the number of teachers, and you'll see the resulting impact on average class sizes from a high of plus 1.7, and in the case of second grade, it actually goes down by 1.3. There's also in the Northville budget what I'm calling a reserve teacher position. So what is that? That's an extra position to allow us to anticipate a growth in enrollment, a surprise over the summer like we experienced last year, so that you'll already have money in your budget to deal with that. Not necessarily at Northville. We had to put that position someplace, and we put it at Northville because A, it has been the primary school that's been growing of late, and then B, kindergarten is where you're most likely to be surprised by an enrollment spike over the summer. The other kids mostly are here, and we know where they are, and we know where they'll be next year. So Northville, same number of sections next year as this year, plus this reserve teacher that could be used at Northville or Hill and Plain or here at Sarah Noble based on developments over the summer. At Sarah Noble, there's a reduction of 1 section based on enrollment for a total of 34. And the average class size at Sarah Noble next year will be 23.5 under this budget. We're also adding an English language learner teacher. That position sits in the Department of Instruction budget for budgetary purposes, but that person will live in this school, providing English language services to youngsters who need that help to get going. At the middle school, we're forecasting an enrollment decline of about 47. And I did for a while go back and forth with Dr. Longo about should that translate into a staffing reduction. That's the most significant enrollment decline that we're looking at for next year. I ultimately decided not to do that. And the reason is, as you know, our middle school is organized around teams, which I think is a very sensible structure at the middle school level. But that means that if you're going to reduce at the middle school level, you either take out a whole team, or you abandon the team structure, or you don't do anything. So in this case, it seemed to me that we should not eliminate a team, that we should continue with the same complement of staff members as we have this year, despite the projected decline in enrollment. Looking at about 943 youngsters there next year. Excuse me. At the high school, we're projecting an increase, 26 more students next year than now. The 2 changes at the high school is that this budget eliminates a vocational tech position which is vacant, and I gather there was some discussion about adding that position when we get to the high school. I'm sure some of you will want to talk about what about that position and why wasn't it filled and so forth. But as it sits now, it's a vacant position, and I thought it would be wise to eliminate that position to offset the addition of a bilingual teacher who will be here, be with us at New Milford High School. State and federal law require that when you have more than 20 students whose native language is a particular language and who require bilingual instruction, when you hit that number of 20, you're required to provide bilingual instruction. So that's why this is happening at the high school. In the Department of Instruction, and when Alicia gets her turn in a couple of nights, she'll be giving you a lot more detail about this. But I'm suggesting that we add a position called Director of Curriculum and Instruction to our program. I think we can and should do more to support teachers in curriculum implementation and other things designed to enhance achievement for our students. So we'll talk more about that when Alicia takes her turn at bat, but that position would be focused on assessment, identifying areas where we need to make improvements, helping teachers to implement the curriculum that you have been approving over the last couple of years. In addition to that, this budget calls for 3 head teacher stipends at each of the 2 primary schools. Those are the 3 grades where we don't have head teachers at the moment. And those stipends are a little less than $3,000 apiece, and they would allow the 2 principals to designate a head teacher for kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade to play a role in coordinating and improving instruction for those children. In the Department of Special Education, we're proposing the addition of a special ed supervisor from the elementary grades pre-K through 5 for 3 reasons, really. One, our special education enrollment, as I mentioned, is increasing. Second, at the present, other than Ms. Olson, who covers everything from soup to nuts, we only have 1 special ed supervisor, and that person focuses only on grades 9 through 12. So this budget, by reallocating some of our current resources and bringing in a 2nd supervisor, would allow us to extend direct supervision of our special ed program to all of our grades pre-K through 12. I looked around at some of the other districts, and on average, they have about 124 students per supervisor, 124 special ed students per supervisor. We have 284 students per supervisor, more than twice the average of the towns that we typically compare ourselves to. With the addition of this 2nd supervisor, our numbers will, that number will fall, but we'll still have like 190 special ed kids per supervisor, still more than the average in the area. And that's very important to our classroom teachers and our principals who need support in keeping up with IEPs, keeping up with PPT attendance, making sure that kids are getting the service they need, dealing with parents who may have questions or concerns. So I really see this as a school support position that is significant. There are no other staffing changes in the special ed arena other than this one. Likewise, in the Department of General Administration, no proposed changes in personnel. The general administration budget contains a little over $8.5 million for employee health care. That's an increase of about $322,000 over this year's budget. I'm going to talk about health care a little more in a minute, but the health care program is funded in the general administration budget. We also include $3.9 million for general education transportation. That's an increase of $114,000 over this year, and that's in a contract that we have with the bus company, so that's locked in. Finally, this budget includes turnover savings of about $279,000. This is an estimate of the difference between people who are with us now and leave and the cost of their replacement that on average is lower. That's a projection, but it's a reasonable thing to include in a budget so that you're not over budgeting for salaries, because we know that there will be some measure of turnover between now and next fall. A little more about health insurance. Several of you have been involved in our conversations with the town and insurance providers about improvements in the health insurance program that we want to make for the vast majority of our district employees. We're going to be shifting in the course of this conversation that we're having with our employee unions to something called the State Partnership Plan. We're not quite there yet. We have the specifics of the plan. We have cost estimates from our insurance representative, and we're now working through these issues with each of our collective bargaining groups. But I think it's fair to say that each of them, and in particular including the teachers union, have been looking for this kind of change for some years. So I don't anticipate that we won't be able to get this done, but we're in process. Shifting to that plan is going to maintain the quality of coverage that people have now. It's going to avoid about $740,000 of expense to this board because of the efficiencies of the state program. And it will also mean modest savings for employees because most of our employees pay a share of the premium. So if your expenses go down, their share also goes down. So I continue to think that this is a good idea. You were all here in this room a couple of months ago with all the town officials where we all agreed that we should do this, and we're getting closer, and this budget reflects the new plan. To be effective July 1, assuming we get all our homework done over the next few weeks. Next, in the area of facilities, no changes are proposed in personnel. We are increasing non-personnel costs, we're increasing personnel costs district-wide by about $95,000, and that breaks down into three broad categories. About 60% of that increase will go to contracted salary increases for custodial and maintenance personnel under our contract with the Teamsters. About 27% will go to utilities. We either know or we've estimated what electricity and gas and oil and all that stuff will cost. And then the balance, about 13%, to other non-personnel expenses. In the technology arena, again, no changes are planned in personnel. As you know, we're working to fill the directorship and the one of the tech positions, but no changes in the personnel count for technology. This budget does include about $10,000 for non-personnel, non-capital technology expenses district-wide, which we'll detail for you when that comes around later in the process. Next, there is a capital plan in this budget, about $215,000 directed toward technology upgrades. This is the continuing refreshing and replacing of computers, Chromebooks, smartboards, servers, all the things that allow everybody to communicate and do the things that they need to do. And then about $197,000 worth of facilities upgrades that Kevin will detail for you when his turn comes around. Total of about $412,000 in capital projects. I'm asking that $322,500 come from the board's capital reserve account. It's the same number as this year. The difference, the $89,000 that would not come from the capital reserve account, is in this operating budget, and it contributes modestly to the bottom line. Two more things that I just want to make mention of. We are eliminating, I am recommending that we eliminate pay-to-play in this budget. That means foregoing about $110,000 worth of revenue that was budgeted for that purpose this year. And finally, there's $31,000 in this budget to enhance our copier service, which I have to say is one of the nagging problems that I hear a lot from staff members and employee representatives, that the copiers are not reliable, that it's a pain in the neck, and so forth. I am at the very beginning of trying to figure that out. I've had a preliminary conversation with the RICO representative, and my plan is to put this whole thing out to bid, see what RICO and Savin and Xerox and anybody else wants to say. What would you charge us if we put our whole district over a period of time onto a lease arrangement? So we don't have to worry about buying copiers and you have a big spike in your budget one year because 5 copiers need to be replaced. Let's lease the whole thing, and let's put them on some type of a maintenance program, and let's even consider some type of an identification so that each person has a code number, and we can look for places where maybe somebody's way out of line in terms of, a lot of times when you get new copiers, just like when they widen a highway, usage goes up. We don't want that to happen. We want to provide quality, reliable machines, and we want the usage to be responsible. So I'm going to be working on that over the next couple of months. Before this budget process comes to an end, I'll have a proposal for you, and we'll see if we can afford it. That is it. And I want to just open the floor up to comment or discussion, if there are any reactions to what you just heard, before we turn it over to our elementary school colleagues.
Very much.
Yep, you're welcome.
Okay. All right, Angie?
The tech teacher at the high school, is there currently a sub in that position?
I don't believe so. Mr. Shagru is here someplace. Yeah. The question was, is there a sub in the tech position? I believe it's completely vacant.
Okay.
Okay, anybody else at this point? And of course, you know, we have several evenings.
We'll have plenty of nights, and the people who've really done the work will be in front of you to dig into any page or any number that you'd like to. But thank you for your patience in listening to all that.
Okay. Also, feel free to, you know, go back and forth. That's okay too during the deliberations, all right? Yeah, JK.
Just ask a clarifying question for the process.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I found particularly helpful, and maybe other board members shared, this, was kind of a cumulative list of questions that we had all asked, and those were then kind of memorialized, and then we have kind of a running record of all the questions that were asked by every board member. I don't know if there's a provision for us to do that this year.
I think Anthony has a plan for that. You want to just tell him how you...
Well, on the same token, before we get started there, certainly there's some questions we may have that may take some time. Is that what you're referring to?
Right, but
Yes.
also like every question that was asked, but then those that were researched, then
Sure.
we had that document.
Absolutely.
Right. And
Yeah,
This was the document that we did last year.
Right,
and that
right.
includes
Okay.
questions. So any of them that can't be answered here with, within a minute or two, we'll log them and then provide responses.
no, I think that was really helpful for board members, but again, thank you for.
Yep, we'll do it.
yeah.
To
Wendy?
expand upon that,
Sure.
thank you. Also, last year, I think we did a pretty good job of trying to get the information to board members prior to budget adoption, so we have time to review all that
Oh,
material, if we could
absolutely,
do that.
yeah.
And just a reminder to the public, there's numerous opportunities for the public to be heard, so I think that's important to say too.
All right. Okay, at this time, we'll start with the elementary schools. We'll start with Northville. Or do we want to go Hill and Plain first?
I think Alicia and her two colleagues here actually have a plan for this, so...
Okay, then we'll hear the plan.
Good evening. So to
And
my
I
right,
want to recognize Mayor Bass, who snuck in behind me here after I started talking, so welcome, Pete. Thank you for being here.
okay, so good
I
evening.
am sorry.
That's okay.
Please.
Thank you. As you know, Pat Porvello couldn't be with us tonight, so I will take the place of Pat Porvello and try to answer any of your questions with regard to the Hill and Plain budget. I'm actually going to do a slide in her absence, and Ann Bilko will present on the collective energy within K-5, inclusive of Sarah Noble, and Susan Marie is to my right, and she will do the same. So we're presenting tonight on all three budgets in one, like we've done in the past.
Okay. Just give me a chance to relocate here.
You thought you could stay there, huh?
We wanted to start with keeping in mind what our mission is for the New Milford Public Schools, and thank you for our opportunity to present to you and for you to be willing to listen to our thoughts and our presentation this evening.
Just to follow up what Mrs. Murray said, I always feel it's important to thank each of you for the time that you give this process. I know you give hundreds of hours, I'm sure, but it's a pleasure to be here, a pleasure to talk about some exciting things. And then I'd always really be remiss if I didn't speak to, thank you for the people who come to Sarah Noble every day. We are an organization that is very student-focused, and I couldn't be more lucky to work with the individuals who are working every day that keep it student-focused and do a great job. So it's my pleasure to talk about some of the academic highlights. One of the things that is an academic highlight is the K2 Phonics pilot at HPS and NES, and they laid out a support with structures and time, and that's something that had been in the works for a while, and we're excited to have that. Professional learning for staff by administration on the CCT. That is really kind of the turnkeying the work that the administrators have been doing with revision, and now turnkeying that towards the teachers and letting them experience some of the work that we've been doing. Professional learning happens for all teachers, every 6-day rotation in our PLC format. They're able to meet together as teachers. They're sometimes working in literacy and math, and then sometimes working on Serbi or looking at their data and any number of things. And that's a structure that we really believe in, and we think it's good for students and staff alike. Second year of exemplars in mathematics, and this is, our math coach is highly involved in this. This is really those, if you went to 5th grade, when I went to 5th grade, those dreaded word problems or those multi-step problem-solving activities that require kids to really dig in, persevere through multiple steps, figure out, not only the math, but how to apply the math well to a larger problem. So we're excited about the work that we're doing in exemplars in math. We're working with Revision to be a supporter of teachers with very descriptive and targeted feedback on instruction. And that's been an ongoing process with Revision and continues with all administration. Preparation for support of science professional learning for teachers with the assistant superintendent and GSS is coming, where we have a plan in place to roll that out to teachers. Mr. Corpo has kind of scaffolded it over the next couple of years, and I'm confident she's going to talk about that. But we're excited to provide that to teachers in a way that they can kind of digest it over time, over a number of years. And then, I'm certainly very proud, I'm sure Ms. Murray is as well, about our attention to social emotional learning and trying to understand the students as a whole student. It's really a key to their success, it's a key to our success as a school, and very, very important that we focus on that.
So in terms of the principals and their work, which really extends from the work of the coaches and the work with Revision, as you heard Ann Bilko say, each of the building principals met with me at the close of last year and created professional learning plans for their building. What they were going to take on in terms of helping teachers better understand the CCT in support of all the feedback that they're giving them. So what does this really mean, and what does it look like in practice? So they've done a really nice job of beginning that work this year and holding their own professional learning in their building. And that's a big step. If you've never really done that before and had to lead learning in a building, it takes a lot of planning and a lot of self-growth development and reflection. So I give nothing but kudos to the principals this year for even attempting to embark on that journey with us. Professional development takes place on the first Thursday of every month with the teaching staff, and that is handled in different ways. Sometimes the principals lead it, sometimes the coaches lead it, sometimes it's a head teacher or teachers meeting together to work together on a problem of practice or to dig deeper into curriculum and supports. We have our math, our literacy, and our data coach. They push into those professional learning community meetings, and then there's daily coaching that goes on with staff. It's important to note on the previous slide, you saw that it happens more regularly in certain areas, and that once every 6-day rotation is when a coach may see a teacher. It's an opportunity, even though that's shared time. At the primary schools, because there are 2 coaches that are split, they're really technically part-time in 2 buildings, so they only see the teachers once every 12-day rotation, and I speak to that more in my presentation. It's important to note they actually have less of an opportunity to work on instructional supports than in other buildings. Calibration of assessments, what that means is just making sure that when we're scoring student work, teachers are looking at it through similar lenses and are able to have conversations about what they see in relation to the student work against how it's scored, and coming to agreement with what that looks like and talking about next steps together to improve learning for all kids. And the principals are a part of that effort and sit in on those meetings and help to guide the work. The department meetings happen at the high school and at the middle school, and so lead teachers tend to guide that work and working with other teachers in grade levels to work on goals that they've come up with, or again, just to have some concrete, really specific conversations about what they're seeing in practice, and even work together to better understand units of study that they're about to implement and make sure that they have all the materials that they need to do that. So using their time really wisely. And then, as you know, over the last few years, we've put a lot of time, energy, and focus on using positive behavior intervention and supports using the teacher of teacher model. So our administrators are a part of that work, and and a team of teachers from each building are still learning through CERC and working together to put supports in place to help all students succeed in the area of behavior and monitoring their own feelings as they go throughout the day to make them better equipped to tackle the academic work.
Right. Social emotional support in kindergarten through fifth grade. We have several different things going on, and this has been wonderful because it grows more each year. We have a guidance program with a full-time guidance counselor in each one of the schools. We have in the kindergarten, the primary schools, we have a shared social worker for student and family support, and this has been tremendous in helping us to tackle concerns regarding attendance, homelessness, family needs, and seeking outside support for wraparound services for families in need. Social thinking curriculum, this is something that's delivered more by our guidance counselors, our psychologist, and the social worker. And this is thinking about your thinking. It's helping students in small group work. There's something called the Super Flex program, so they're looking at cartoon characters that are analogous to things that children experience, having rock brain for someone who is very rigid in their thinking. Let's see. There's another character that has to do with being distractible. So these are subjects that they deal with in a way that children can really understand them and apply them. Zones of regulation lessons are given to children by the same support staff, and that's having children being able to pinpoint where are they in their emotional state. Are they in the green? You want to be in the green zone. That means everything's copacetic. You're able to move ahead and working with a stable, calm approach. And then getting into the yellow zone, that is when you're starting to ramp up in your concerns, your level of concern. Red zone is when a child is dysregulated, emotionally upset, or totally off kilter. And so it's getting students to be much more aware of how they are feeling and being able to name what they're feeling, and then what skills and tools to use so that they can address that and self-regulate. It's very powerful work, and it's a delight to hear young children talking about, I'm in the green zone, I'm doing great, but I know that if this is going to happen, I will go in the yellow zone, so this is what I'm going to do so I don't go there. So that they're proactive, and it's not an adult managing them, they're self-aware. We have a lot of small group work that's being done by our social worker, counselor, and psychologist in lunch bunches where children will sit and eat lunch with the adult and then be talking about a particular topic, which could be a zone of regulation. It could be around a friendship group, social skills, what-if scenarios, family changes, so grouping children with like needs, and being able to work through some concerns that they have. And then conflict management as well. How can you approach a situation like this so that it's workable for everybody? Dr. Tomasello, we're lucky to have him back with us again this year to work on social emotional lessons, growth mindset in the kindergarten, first grade, and second grade classrooms, and teaching children about flexibility in thinking, about kindness, about focusing on others. And this, in our age group, it's particularly important because developmentally, children are at an egocentric stage, and it's helping them to know, where do I start and end, and where does somebody else start and end, and really just even having that body awareness of where is my body in space and in relation to you and to you, and being able to interact in a way that is productive. And that leads right into the purposeful play in implementation in kindergarten, which is helping students navigate the play situations, conflict resolution, making I statements. I don't like it when you, or I like it when I'm able to do thus and such. So it's these, it's the implementation of those social skills that we're working very hard to help children have, so that learning can take place in the rest of the day, because we have so many so many activities particularly with science, science and math and social studies and reading, and even writing, where children need to visit with each other. They need to talk about their thinking with each other. They need to work cooperatively. And these growth mindset lessons, the purposeful play, and the SEL lessons all scaffold that ability for children to be able to work together cooperatively. And then finally, at Northville, we are extremely lucky that we have something called, we call the STAR program, which is students taking action and responsibility for behavior. And we have an ESS, an effective school services clinician, who works with no more than 9 students. We have a full load right now of 9 students, providing wraparound therapy services. Children would receive individual counseling, group counseling, and parents receive individual counseling and group counseling, also to help students who are having some difficulty with behavioral issues, or maybe have survived some sort of trauma that they are working through. And the school setting is a really great place to do that, so that they can have that emotional stability, so they can learn. They can address their academics, and they're not worrying about whatever it is that is an issue for them in their lives at this time. So we're very, very lucky to have that at Northville this year.
And social emotional learning across the state has really become a major focus. When Dr. Tomasello and I presented at the Cape Caps conference around this work, there were a lot of board members in the room who asked a lot of great questions about how we started the work. And really, New Milford has been a pioneer in introducing purposeful play, thanks to the advocacy of the teachers when I first arrived here 3 years ago, saying to us as a whole, as a district, kids aren't playing outside as much. We're noticing a lot of pushing, shoving, a lot of things that aren't done intentionally, but kids can't read each other. And so all of the work that Mrs. Murray spoke to so beautifully really paints a picture for you of what happens during that play block as teachers are teaching into empathy and self-regulation and things of that nature. And Mr. Dahl was there during that presentation, so he could really speak to kind of where districts were in their work. And many of them are just in the beginning starting to think about, how do we tackle this, because it is such a large issue, but in small chunks so that it's integrated and not seen as one other thing. And I think we've done a really nice job of that. So I want to thank the teachers and the principals.
It's my pleasure to talk about some of the community highlights. You know, the school community highlights, I'm extremely proud of we continue to give students an opportunity at 3-5 to not only try different intramurals at different grades, but also to try different activities. We had a conversation at the last board meeting about trying to keep those choices fresh for kids, things that they're interested in. And so I think we've had chess club every year, but we're also adding different clubs to suit our students, and it's really good for students socially. It builds a tighter family-like feeling in the school when kids are able to stay after or come early and do one of the many choices, and we stagger them throughout the year so that you never have to make a choice between basketball and chess, say. So we'll make sure that kids have lots of choices. In addition to that, the K2 morning arrival recess that happens every morning, I have to say that I'm highly jealous of that. There's so much good research about the students having recess first thing, getting out, running around. It's so healthy. It's so good for kids. when they do that. It's a great way to start their day, a really positive motion for them. PBIS is something that we're very excited about in all of the buildings, and each building has their different take on this because you can really tailor it to suit the needs of the building. So my work with PBIS doesn't look exactly like Mrs. Murray's, but it's tailored to that building and that culture, and how can we continue to positively support students and shaping their behavior over time. The school gardens and tower gardens are a great community highlight here. We have a garden here. The elementary schools have or the K-2 schools have a garden as well. And I believe Hill and Plain has a tower garden that they've added, that's the rumor. I haven't seen it, but that's what I hear. And then,
Northville,
community
too.
highlights in the greater community are things that we continue to work on. Veterans Day is something that we're all very proud of. Each school does a lot with our veterans in town, and that day is just terrific. It's a great celebration of families, and we do a lot of good work leading up to that to help kids really connect with the people in their present and past that have served. And we have a great wall here of children sharing people in their family, and something that we're all very proud of. The Backpack Snack Pack program, which is tough to say, but is a fabulous program. And, we're kind of upping our investment in that area, and I think that was great in the fall. Positive Parent Nights, Parents as Partner Nights, great ways to get parents in and hear a little bit about expectations in school, how they have changed, and how they can help their student in different areas. Grade level service projects is something we're very proud of, that each grade kind of takes on something different. The 5th grade did the Santa Fund, the 3rd grade is doing the Animal Welfare Society, but each grade level takes something, and we want to build that understanding in kids. There's a bigger world out there. What can you do to make it a better world? So we're proud of that. And then some school-wide service projects. I believe every school does the food drives. We do a First Friday food drive here, and I know social services is always very grateful to have so much that's given to them from our young ones when they come in. It's also a great lesson for them. Kids Site is terrific. Last year it wasn't at Sarah Noble. It was the first time. This year they literally were here the last 3 days. It's amazing. I think we're really lucky to have them come in. It takes literally a minute for a child to look into that camera, and just this past 3 days they were able to find 24 kids that need further testing. So I think if we found 24 kids that are under 10 years old, that's terrific, and maybe they get the right glasses or the right eye care. So that's something wonderful that we keep working with the Lions Club with. Wellness advisory committees in buildings. There's been a district committee for several years in buildings. They're getting underway and looking at student wellness, but in Sarah Noble, we're looking at adult wellness too. I always say education is a full tank profession. You need a full tank. You need to be in good shape to do it well. So we're looking at adult wellness as well as student wellness. Read Across America is always a great, exciting time in elementary schools, and all of the elementary schools take that day pretty seriously. And a second shout out to the Tower Garden. I'm seeing a clue that the HPS Tower Garden is really at Town Hall. Yes.
There's one school too.
All right. Some of the budget notes, I always think it's a good idea to give you kind of the heads up of things that, might jump off the page at you. We spoke last year about the investigations cost, and just as a reminder, those prices were set 3 years ago. Well, I guess it was even 4 years ago, as it's a 3-year purchase agreement. So just when you see those numbers, that's something to bear in mind. And then some of the other notes you might kind of jump off the page at you. At Northville, the classroom library books have replaced the TC library, and what we found is that that's much more efficient and economical to fund it that way. You get a lot more bang for the buck. And then at SNIS, what you'll see is, I've spoken a couple of years in a row about refresh lines on capital items such as carpets and furniture. And I really think it's fiscally responsible to think of those things in a refresh and not to wait and in 8 years come to you with a $20,000 carpet bill. So you'll see that those have returned to what would have been. And then also at SNIS, there are several what we used to call equipment lines now folded into supply lines. So you'll see some anomalies where something goes up 150%, but also down at 150% in another line. I'm happy to talk to you about those things. And Anthony has informed me that makes every school the same, so it's easier for you guys, hopefully, to see that. It's a little bit more uniform across the district in that way. Also at Sarah Noble is that English language teacher. Dr. Tracy spoke to that. And at the K2 schools, there's the head teacher for each of the grades at each of the schools. Okay.
All right, well, keys to K-5 student success. The TC program and the grade level libraries have been proven by data that we have been collecting that it's both of these are making a big difference. And we're seeing an increase in the reading levels of students when they're measured by running records. And we're seeing some carryover also on the MAP tests. The embedded PD provided by instructional and data coaches has been invaluable. Embedded in that it's being applied and being used by teachers purposefully and ongoing. It's not just an add-on, it's with purpose and for the improvement of instruction. The intervention to support students with academic needs, and that would be through the survey process, through the intervention of our math and reading interventionist, as well as the coaches to provide some suggestions for how can we better help these students who are struggling. Intervention to support students with social emotional needs. Again, our STAR program is one example of that, and certainly the support services being provided at all the schools by the social workers, by the counselors, guidance counselors, and the psychologists. That's very, very important at this point. And providing teachers with those tools that they can use in the classroom so that they're addressing students' emotional needs. And sometimes it can be something just as simple as having a student say, I need a break. Could I take a break? And then maybe someone walking with the child in the halls, or sometimes it's something like jumping on a mini trampoline for 5 minutes. And that physical movement and that gross motor joint impact makes a difference and helps a child focus back in on what needs to be done. And sometimes it can be on a very regular schedule. Right now we have a little guy, 15 minutes you work, 5 minutes you get a scooter break. And it helps. It really, really helps the little guys. Again, it's that getting a self-awareness of where is my body in space, where does my body end, where does yours end, and how can I become more self-aware so that I can learn. And then the revision training for administrators is ongoing, but this year we are also having our team mentors, the team mentors who are working with our brand new teachers. And they're getting that revision training also so that they can assist their mentees in using the same language as the administrators. The CCT rubric and the team rubric they dovetail. very nicely, and using the same language to improve instruction. And the coaches have been taking that training as well, so that we're all aligned in how we are providing explicit feedback that is helping people drive forward their professional practice. And we'll take questions. Do you have anything for us at this point?
Carry a phone around.
I was gonna, but he wouldn't let me.
Thank you all for the presentation. It's
Our pleasure.
extremely helpful. Is there any way that the board could get a copy of what we just saw? I think that would be,
Absolutely.
thank you.
Well, we'll make a note, yes, if the board could have copies of any presentations.
Thank you.
I was going to say that at the end of the evening, but thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. First, if there's no general questions, if you turn to your budget books under Hill and Plain, we'll on page 1, and we'll go through it with you, and if you have any questions. On page 1, I think a lot of the overview has already explained that. And on page 2. And 3.
David, could we go back to page 2 for a second?
Absolutely.
Just a general question on the, basically, the supplies being
I
down.
was going to ask about that.
I would imagine that's because of just sheer estimation on enrollment. Is that fair to say? Or how are we getting to that number?
The supplies are allocated based on that per pupil
what I
expenditure,
thought,
so you
okay.
see that net
So it's
loss
into-
at Hill
okay.
and Plain, and
Yep.
it's represented in the supply line there.
Thank you.
Now,
You're welcome.
Can we go back to the supplies there with the presentation? That doesn't necessarily, what is it? What constitutes supplies?
Anthony, do you want to speak to how many lines are rolled up in that supply line before I go into specifics?
Yep, on the, in the inside pocket,
Right here.
there was a
Right.
major object code chart here that outlines what falls into supplies. It's on the back side. So it's the 600 series on the right-hand side there. And so if you're talking about Hill and Plain specifically regarding supplies, based on enrollment, the per pupil dollars that were given to them year over year, per the calculation, with the drop in enrollment, I gave them basically $30,185 less this year versus last year at Hill and Plain to allocate not just to salaries, but those things that they have control of within their budget. And most of it does manifest itself in supplies, though. But that's the explanation for Hill and Plain specifically regarding supplies.
To answer your question, Mr. Lawson, anywhere there is a description like art, health, ELA, reading, math, there's supply
Right,
lines
right.
connected to that, and that's what's pulling up in that overall.
Okay. And back to page 3. Sure.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Anthony always asks the question, and it sounds like you made some mention of it, the apportionment.
Sure.
For the K2s and then the intermediate school. Per
So,
student.
this year for Hill and Plain and Northville,
Yeah.
that dollar amount is $303 per.
Okay.
And Sarah Noble is $275 per.
Okay.
And that amount at Sarah Noble, as per the calculations, been brought up. There was a larger disparity if you look back last year.
Right.
Hill and Plain and HPS and NES were at $315.19 last year, while Sarah Noble was down at $234. We've adjusted the per pupil at Sarah Noble to bring them more in line with HPS and NES. They're not equal. There are more things that go into the calculation with HPS and NES, the grades being split between two different buildings versus here. But in years past, before I started here, Hill and Plain and Northville, there was a small discrepancy between those two buildings. So for the controllables for the principals, I believe it was 2 years ago, we equalized Hill and Plain and Northville. And this year, we're bringing Sarah Noble up slightly, not to the same level, but up slightly. And you want the other,
No, we can move forward, but there's parity, you know, I always go back to that.
Yeah.
The two schools, we want to make sure we assure that parity will be Hill and Plain.
correct, so they have the same per pupil
Right.
this year.
And just am I clear, you talked about the major object of supplies, would that then include supplies, or does that extend beyond supplies?
That
That portion.
That includes the number that I've given them, so Hill and Plain this year, at an enrollment of, projected of 356 at $303 per, is 107,868. They have to allocate that not just to supplies.
Okay, right.
Yep. It gets allocated across professional services, basically anything that they need to cover in their buildings that's not salaries, that's not benefits, and is not a utility or security or, what's the last one I'm looking for? Telephone, which is one of the utilities.
Was that tied into the second to the last slide of the, I could be wrong because it's all outside, but the furniture piece of, you know, the rollout, you discussing the actual at Sarah Noble, some of those alignments, is that
Yep.
part of that as well?
Yep,
Right,
so-
I thought.
To bring Sarah Noble in line.
Yes, exactly,
Yep.
exactly.
Anthony, I'm sorry, can you repeat the per pupil of supplies for each of the schools?
Sure, the total amount given to each location or the amount per student?
Per amount per student?
The amount per student given this year to Hill and Plain and Northville is $303. And the Sarah Noble number is $275.
Can you run down the line for the other schools while we're here?
Scotticoke is $335, and the high school is $645. Remember, that has to get allocated to athletics at the high school as well.
Right.
And when we give the question and answer summary, I'll put a little chart in there.
Okay, thank
I
you.
expand on that number, just a question on that. Sarah Noble's was modified from last year. Have any of the others been modified?
No.
Thank you.
Page 3. And 4. Oop, JT?
The first line there, the budget change, it's $250,000 decrease. Is that then, if I'm understanding this correctly, because I think this will be an ongoing question, it's a reduction of 3 teachers, 1 at grade 1 and 2 at grade 2, and that 252 is the combination of the decrease in staffing, but also includes any contractual increases?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
But then there are 3 less positions that are factored into there for 1920.
Okay. So it's the combination of those two
Yes,
forces
but
at play?
the salary obligation is met to them.
Yep. Yep, thank you for clarifying.
And page 4.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Sorry. Going to the second line, and then all the other lines, no, kidding. The second line with the $20,785 reduction in non-certified gen ed positions, I didn't see a reduction in paras so where is that 20,000?
That's a realignment within buildings, so the 1920 that's built that you see in front of you for Hill and Plain for those paras is for 1 FTE, whereas in the budget build for 1819, there were 2 there. So that's not a reduction in paras, it's just a realignment within buildings.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Would that be in the appendix then?
In Appendix C? No. You won't see that in Appendix C.
Angie?
So just to clarify, that para was moved to another building.
Correct.
Is that what you're saying? Okay, so we're going to see that reflected
Yeah.
in one of the other
Exactly.
buildings. Okay. And that was done for enrollment purposes, or,
Yes, sorry.
And student needs, yeah.
I'm sorry?
Enrollment and and/or student needs.
Okay.
Okay, kid went from Helen Plain to Sarah Noble and needed a para.
Okay.
Page 4. Tammy?
Just a little housekeeping. On the social, the 56430, the budget to budget is not 0, it should be 500. Am I wrong?
Which line is that?
That is the BLA 110. It's the, so it's
see.
under program social. The periodicals was 2879. This year it's 3379, but there's a budget change of 0.
It's reflected in the total line underneath that, though, see it? It's
But
just
it-
incorrectly
But it should
noted
be,
there,
yeah,
yes,
it should be there,
yes.
right, okay, I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't seeing something
Nope.
wrong. And my only other question is, the library non-certified line is down 11%. Are we losing a position or a partial position?
So if I could back up just to the social studies one,
Yeah,
the
sure.
budget to budget change percent, the 0% in that cell is wrong. The dollars are in for the 1920 budget in the amount of $3,379. So in the next iteration of your book, you'll get a change page to correct that one cell all the way over to the right that shows 0% increase.
And it will be 17?
Yes, 1737. And the next question is in regards to library.
Yes, I'm sorry, the salary non-certified library line is down 11,000, and I'm wondering what that reflects.
There was one staff member when the budget was built in 1819. That position is now split between Hill and Plain and Northville, .5 and .5.
So there's a full person and then there's a .5.
There
At each
was a,
school.
there was a full person in 1819 for Hill and Plain that is now a .5.
Okay.
Am I correct?
So budget to budget, that is a reduction
Yes,
of half a position.
that was done last year.
Thank you, that was all my questions on 4.
Angie?
Again, I just want to clarify.
Yeah, thank you.
So there still is a full-time certified staff in the library, and then a half-time non, so there still is 1.5. Okay, thank you.
And page 5.
The salary non-certified principal's office, there's 18,000 down, is that change in personnel or?
Yes, so it goes, someone left at a higher salary, someone came in.
So it's still a
at a
full-time
lower-
position, but a lower salary?
Still full-time.
Okay.
Angie?
Under the total technology, is that also a realignment of staff to another building?
Which line are you
Where it
on?
goes from the very bottom,
Yeah.
where it goes from
That comes
34 down
to,
to
you'll
17.
see that later in SNES.
Yes, that's the
Okay.
same cost.
And on that page, the stipends, it's gone up a lot.
So those are the increase of a kindergarten head teacher, a first grade head teacher, and a second grade head teacher to be in line with what Sarah Noble and Scotticoke already have.
So those are the head teachers?
Yes.
There's 3?
3 at each building. You'll also see them at Northville.
Okay.
Angie?
And could we just get a job description of what those increases for those head teachers are?
Yes, we have
Thank
those.
you.
Yep. Tammy?
I'm sorry, Anthony, on the telephone line item, 3060, 3090 is not an 800 budget, it's 30.
Yes.
And so obviously the percentage is gonna be, or, no, the percentage, yeah, the percentage is gonna be different as well.
All right.
It's 80, not 800.
Takes care of $770 for us. Right off the get-go.
There we go, wow.
And the comp ed line, it's down 16,009.
Yeah, that was the one I asked
That
about,
was
the
the
bunch of
funding.
Sarah Noble. It moved to
So
Sarah,
see
the Sarah Noble budget.
Right, sorry.
Yes, in 1819, it was built for 1.0 to 0.5 of an FTE there now.
Page 6.
The 51115, the psychiatrist, the psychologist, yeah, is down 5,000. Is that a new person or is that hours given other places?
Can you repeat that line for us, please?
51115, salary certified psychologist, it's down 5,000, but that's a strange number. 21400 BPA,
It's the third block
Yes.
down from the top.
third block down psychologist.
So when 1819 was built, that was a vacancy,
Okay.
and the person that actually filled that position is earning less than we
Salary adjustment. Okay, salary
budgeted for the
adjustment. Yep.
vacancy.
Good, okay.
Could I ask a question?
Sure.
The turnover savings, right? Maybe this is a time to ask that.
Of the 279 that they presented?
Yeah.
Wasn't it about 270 in the overview?
Yes.
Okay,
Right.
I didn't mean to interrupt, go ahead.
The turnover savings, is that accounting certified staff? Does that extend beyond certifying staff? Or is it really just taking, let's say, the turnover savings for the teacher corps? Or are we talking about everybody in district?
Just for certified.
And would that be like a certified, like here, a certified psychologist, would that be also?
Yes, that's
Okay,
part of it. So
certified.
it's really just the certified teachers and any administrators.
Okay.
That's where the turnover savings is supposed to count.
So we've always been able to try to pin that number down fairly accurately with that cohort. So I think that's important, that we're not extending that turnover savings into other, custodial maintenance or anything like that, staying within that.
Yep, and
But that also is our largest unit.
Correct.
Okay.
That number's in the DOGA budget, not in any of the individual schools.
So like a number like this doesn't get captured in that number, at least it's already, like this, like we can't pull it to what places. in the
Correct,
budget.
okay, you can't
Right.
double count it. You're
Right,
right.
so we're anticipating from what this 1920 budget will be, any turnover savings is actualized when we
Right.
have that complete.
Yep.
Right.
And while we're on that topic, Anthony, I believe it's true that the presumed turnover savings next year is $100,000 less than was presumed in the current year.
Yep, in the superintendent's proposed, there is a change in turnover savings that amounts to $100,000 basically, and that's in the DOGA budget.
Right.
We're assuming less turnover savings next year versus this year.
That's where we can really capture those numbers in DOGA when we get into that.
Thank you.
Welcome. Okay. Moving on to Northwell. On page 1. And page 2. I'm sorry, 8. Number them differently every year on here. And I gotta say, I miss the picture of the schools we usually get on the front, but that's okay. Okay, page 8. And page 9. Joe?
Under general education, additional supply increases in several categories. Can you give us an idea what that's for?
Sure. In the, at the bottom of the page in math, so there's some pages 9 and 10 at NES need to be revised. The number in math that shows an increase in math supplies of 21,540 has some of the science supplies mixed in there. which will affect the top section on page 10. So that is not all just math supplies. I need to realign those, some to science. And then you wanted one of the ones, the gen ed one, perhaps, you wanted to go through. The one that, this is the 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth line down, the increase of 5209. Some of that is realignment with stuff with the line below it.
I'm sorry, what,
We're within BLB 10,000, which is gen ed at NES.
okay. Are we still, we're on page 9, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Right. Gotcha.
In the first block there in general ed, the general supply number going up by 5,200. Some of that is offset with the reductions there in the 56500 line. But there is a net increase. Overall at NES, if you flip back a page to page 8, the supplies at NES are going up $15,000 in total across all of those individual subjects. So you're gonna see some ups, some downs, but we can provide the detail if there's a specific subject or all subjects, whatever you like, you wanna go through each one of them here, but which supplies are in math year versus science. What would you guys like to do?
I'm fine with what we have right now.
Yeah, if there's anything further, I think it's the combination of things and flipping
Yep.
back and forth
Yep.
that's
Some of
throws us
those-
off here a bit.
Some of
Anthony,
those I'm just
those
gonna-
dollars would have come from the per pupil allotment that you
Yes.
spoke
Right.
of earlier, as
Yep.
allocated by the principals. So they're not all gonna be the same in each school. It's what each principal feels would be the best use of their share.
And the amount of
That's correct.
staff members is what we need supplies.
Exactly.
Thank you. And page 10.
Wait, can I just, I have a
Sure.
question. I'm not sure if this was covered under Joe's question, but the supplies tech-related, the 56500,
Yes.
there's a 455% increase, and the numbers aren't that large, but I'm just wondering what that might be. I'm sorry, it's for furniture and
Just
fixtures.
furniture, Yeah, cafeteria tables.
Oh, perfect, okay.
That's a single item, replacement cafeteria table.
Hopefully not the ones that pinch.
And that's why the number is going to jump off the page like that, the
Right.
percentage, because it's a new introduction, if you will.
Right.
It's a straight line item hit.
Right, but whereas I provided the per pupil to the location, Mrs. Murray took that money and allocated that amount, and based on the need at the school, says, you know, I need this replacement cafeteria table in lieu of potentially some other supplies.
Thank you.
And page 10. And 11. Tammy?
Just to verify the stipends again of the 3 head teachers, correct?
This salary non-certified, the last line, I see the reduction.
This is,
Go on. That corresponds to the same issue we went over at HPS.
Okay,
There was
should I ask
one
that question?
FTE there, and in 1920, that person split between both locations.
It's on page 18.
Thank you.
We'll see that.
Yeah. Joe.
On the stipends, these 3 head teachers are not receiving it now, and currently, we're looking to compensate them for any additional work they're
Currently,
performing.
there aren't any head teachers named at all at the primary schools, and that becomes a real issue with things like shared field trips. So teachers are trying to organize that during maybe some of their PLC time. They're trying to get together, they're trying to Skype with the other school to talk about what's necessary when it comes to curriculum initiatives. They have to talk amongst themselves about who might want to lead the effort, rather than having a point person that they know they can count on to get the information and bring it back to them. Although we certainly would like as many teachers to participate as we can get, sometimes it's just, well, oftentimes it's much easier to have a point of contact for certain things such as PBIS, RBI, the intervention that we do, as well as some curriculum work.
On that note, I mentioned this last budget season. Do we have a dictionary of acronyms? I am the worst at that.
It really does, yeah.
We had one at one time.
Please look, and that
You'd like that ASAP.
Joe, that was my professional development 3 years ago. I can search for mine.
And I'm sorry, I do try to break it out for you where I can, but really it's just that positive behavior work.
NGS, Serbies.
Intervention
Yeah, we're gonna
work.
stop talking.
Do we actually have a little?
Yes.
Yes, we do.
It's in your book.
We update it every year.
But I think,
All the acronyms that come out.
I also think that those of us who are speaking with you
Oh, here it is.
can be a little more careful about throwing off acronyms that we talk about all the time.
Yes.
The Serbies, the CCTs, the SBRL, we should slow down and spell out those TLAs.
Sure.
That's a 3-letter acronym.
Angie?
So, back to the, I'm on page 11, the technology certified staff, non-certified staff. So are we losing services at Hill and Plain and Northville for technology? Like, who is that person and what do they do? Are they,
We have one computer tech that goes between the two buildings, Northville and Hill and Plain. So usually that tech will spend one day at one school, then go to the other school another day. So that's how we took that cut last year. That's how we divided it up this year.
so you're gonna have to explain further to me. So you took what cut?
We made a reduction of a computer tech, and we made it at the elementary level, pre-K through 2 schools.
Okay,
They used to each have one full-time.
okay, so now we share one between them. So,
And that's true this year.
Yes.
so then what is the reduction
Exactly.
now that for next year, what are we cutting?
The 16,275.
Because we've cut it from Hill and Plain and we've cut it from Northville, and we're adding it to Sarah Noble. I looked and I see that, but what are we cutting out of Northville and Hill and Plain now that we're taking that person away?
Anthony, I think he's got the breakdown there for you. We haven't taken the person away completely.
That's exactly what I'm.
Because we're taking it here and
Right.
taking it at Northville. What are we,
Right.
you understand what I'm
I
saying?
do.
What we took was a full position down to a part position, a half a position.
So,
I think-
at some point, we had 2 people there.
Yep.
You know,
Now
2
we have
people
one
filling-
sharing
So now
2
we have
schools.
half at each school. So
Right.
what are we not doing there that we used to be able to do?
Can you
with-
add?
I think I have.
Sure, so Computer Tech does a number of things. They're in charge of the computer labs. They maintain so in my building, we have computer on wheels that we sometimes call cows. But making sure that the Chromes are well maintained, they keep the inventory, they help teachers when, a smart projector blows something's not working, and they're responsive to classrooms, but they also work in the labs. They're maintaining lots of things. They're refurbishing some of the Chromebooks. So they do a whole host of things to support the technology in the building. I'm not sure, Susan, if at K2 it's different than what I described, but that's certainly how it is here.
No, it's just that we only have the one lab with 24, 28 computers, so it's a little bit different, yeah.
And there's not as much testing that goes on at the
Correct.
K2 level on the computer that goes on at Sarah Noble, specifically with the state testing.
Correct.
So there's a lot of work
Correct.
that the techs do to ready us for state testing,
Right.
downloads,
Right.
uploads, working in connection with the state and the director of technology.
So
So,
to
I'm-
connect.
I'm
Maybe I
still a little curious. We've
Yeah.
had 2 people
Right.
doing that job, and we're taking it down to a half. There has to be something that person was doing that is not getting done now,
No,
or we were
it was
overstaffed.
one in each school, and now they're both down to a half.
So it
Correct.
went from 2 to 1.
So it's not a-
Right.
But
But
the
now we're
question
taking
still
it to a
stands.
half
What are
at
you
each-
not getting that you used to
Right.
get?
Well, it would
Right.
be on-the-spot computer repair. Sometimes you'll have to wait on a tech work order.
I think, I see where you're going at.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, but I don't
Yes.
think we're getting, okay.
I'm not
think I
communicating
could-
well.
You used to have one, now you have a half, so what do
Okay,
you lose?
let me do it this way.
Less stuff.
How
Did you not
many
need that person
computer
to begin with?
techs do we have in the elementary schools, not Sarah Noble, this year?
One
One.
half
In each.
in each.
So you have one total.
So one total, okay. So what Angie is saying, there's a reduction of, with, each school has a
I
reduction
do.
of
because it's cut in
16,
half.
approximately 16,000.
Right.
So
Seeing a half
if,
at-
if it's a half at each school, what
So what do you,
this,
what
it should
program?
be zero.
To connect the dots here, it's skipping ahead a little bit, but if you go to page 18 at Sarah Noble, you'll see a larger than expected increase for that same tech
I
line.
got that.
So when we made the cut in 18-19 at referendum, we decided that it was going to be, some of those cuts were going to come from the tech line. At the time, the cut was made at Sarah Noble. That's why if you go to page 18, there's only a dollar
Okay, so
amount.
it's, so these numbers don't necessarily reflect the actual school.
No, they do, but what, this
In-
is
yeah.
really congruent to last year, the budget that we're in right now.
Correct. Right.
That's what's happening.
In
You're seeing the
18
bump based on the, if I think I've got this, that basically when we made the modification at referendum and had to make those adjustments, now you're seeing it ripple
Right.
through the
Within
budget.
tech specifically, that adjustment was made at Sarah Noble.
Mm-hmm.
Once we started the year, in actuality, that change manifested itself as .5 at Hill and Plain and .5 at Northville. So when we're going budget to budget, you're going to see
Oh,
large
okay.
decreases at Hill and Plain and Northville and a large increase at Sarah Noble. What I could do on this question and answer response sheet is net the three out, and you should see increases in line with the other tech lines at the locations.
If you would, please.
I think, Angie, if I can, I think the question, if I captured it correctly, is if we had full-time at each of the elementaries, and now we only have half-time there, what are we not doing that we did before?
Correct.
I believe that the Director of Technology's assessment of the productivity, the amount of help desk tickets that they got for requests, that decision was made that we did not need full-time at both schools. What Susan Murray just said about on-the-spot help right away, that would be an issue if the tech is there one day and then not there
gotta
the
wait
next
until
day.
they get back.
So that's the one piece. But the assessment was, the need wasn't there for two full-time techs.
Thank you.
Susan, what's your impression of the technology functioning at your school? Kids and teachers being able to get on email and having equipment that works?
Yeah,
Has it been
it's
okay or a
generally, it's
problem?
fine, yeah. If there's really a huge issue, then a work order is handled immediately through the tech department. And it's never been, we've never gone without.
Or it might not be same-day service.
Correct, yeah.
And
Does that
pa-
help?
And page 12?
Thank you.
Sorry, Anthony, I just have one more. I want you to stay in the green, I don't want you to go to yellow or red. In my head. All the way at the bottom, the Excel line, supplies, institution, special ed Excel, 3970 to 3970, the budget to budget is 0.
Yep.
Not 3970, and even though you have it in the
yes.
budget to budget percent, I want to make sure it's not reflected in that
good
negative
catch.
25,000 number.
I'll have to cost that out with that whole group
Right.
to make sure.
So budget to budget should be a 0, as Tammy points out, right?
Yes.
On that particular area, on that area.
Right.
Could
good
I,
catch.
could we take a look at the 51115, the budgetary change of 140,000, to get an idea of, Page 12 of the salary certified individual learning.
Second section.
You're talking about SPED or Excel?
SPED.
SPED.
Yeah.
Just give me one moment, please.
Sure. It just seems. Well, that's what I'd like to see.
The large increase there's 1.25 FTEs more here in 1920. Plus, we had at least one replacement that was at a substantially higher rate
Right,
than the
sure.
person replaced.
That
So
happens.
and there are some teachers in that category that are they're making the
Right.
move to step 15,
Right.
which
A
is a
lot
larger
of this is movement, I
increase.
understand.
So there are really
I
three
understand that.
pieces to unpack in that one line.
But there's actually a position as well, as part of that.
There's
I wanna be clear.
1.25 more positions
Okay,
aligned to that building.
1.25, okay. That's what I was looking for, thank you.
You're welcome.
Moving on to Sarah Noble. On 13, I think most of that was covered for us. And 14,
So my concern is with the change, with the 24 kids in grade 5 as the current class size, and we're taking a teacher away there. Will the same thing happen that happened last year with the second grade?
We have the cushion.
Yeah, we have that one.
We had the provision, we'll put them in there, okay. But
float
if
it.
you add another teacher there, your class size goes down to 22.3, which is the exact same as fourth grade. So I'm glad we have a teacher in reserve for that.
Just open up two of
Enrollment.
them.
Yeah,
Yeah, that teacher sits in the Northville budget, but could go wherever the superintendent board think it's needed.
needs to
not
be.
necessarily for elementary schools, district-wide, you're saying?
No, it could be
K-5.
primary or intermediate.
Okay.
Certification.
I believe we're still on page 15, yes.
14 I was on, but
Oh, 14.
I can go to 15.
Are you able
Right.
to,
Oh,
JT?
JT?
Did you have something?
On 15.
Oh, I had something on 13, sorry.
13, all right. All right, we'll go JT and then Angie.
Start over.
No, this cuts across all of the school face pages that we have here. Are these October 1st enrollment numbers?
Yes.
Okay, so I think that's also important for us to keep in mind too, because we're also projecting October 1st, 2018 numbers in a 1920 budget that might also not be the current numbers we have right now.
That is correct.
So I think, even when we say, oh, but fifth grade will have 20 fewer students, that's projecting the 268 we thought, or that were here on October 1st, that might actually not be what that current enrollment number is, right? Am I right with that? So we have to be really careful in these enrollment numbers because there is a certain amount of flux
In both directions.
Yeah.
Right,
In both directions, that's a very valid point. And
Right.
that's why the board
Right.
has had to add or readjust along the way sometimes because we're basically doing this.
right. So we're essentially staffing for, let's say, June 2020 on numbers from October 1st, 2018. Correct. I just want to say that.
Yeah, but we
Okay.
did look at our last ATM meeting together, we did take a look at the current enrollment versus the October 1 projection to see
Right.
if there was a change. And then we asked the principals to advocate based on those numbers, if they had seen a major increase, to actually place a teacher back in that maybe would have potentially have been out. So we did look at that leading all the way up to tonight.
Okay.
And we should look at that again before you take final action, because, if there was suddenly a spike in the last 2 or 3 months, you'd want to know about it.
Thank you, David.
Welcome. Angie, I just want to ask, Joe has a question. What page are you on, Joe?
13.
All right. Mine.
Yeah.
Joe?
Do we know the number of fifth grade students we have today at
Current-
Sarah Noble?
Currently,
Yeah.
you can test my memory. I want to say, I think it's 268, but we can certainly check that.
Which would be
So-
the October 1 number that's in the book.
Which is projected,
268
that's
or
the
288?
projection.
You know what, regarding fifth grade for next year at the 24 mark,
No, right now, today, how many children do we have in fifth grade in Sarah Noble?
Currently.
we can check that exact number, but most of the sections are 24, and I have one section of 25 currently. And, we are flirting with that higher end in fifth grade there. We're flirting with that number. To Mr. Shem's point, it's relatively high.
Why don't we check, before we finish this, we'll check the current enrollments in all the grade levels and tell you where they stand.
I'm not overly concerned about all the grade levels, but if we're having this discussion here, we have to watch what our projections were on October 1st versus where we are and where we're going.
Right.
It's possible, as Ms. Fallenbach said, we could be down even more students currently right now as opposed to going up, or, it's a
Absolutely.
gamble, but I'm surprised we can't automatically come up with the exact number of students in school today.
Hey, look how
Oh, yeah.
quickly we've got that.
Anthony is on the right.
At Sarah Noble, as of January 1st, enrollment in fifth grade, I have 285 I show.
So we're down
285.
from our projection.
From the October 1 number, 288, yes.
Actually, the 285 would be compared to the 288, which is not a projection. It was the actual October 1 enrollment.
Right.
That's off the EDO, is it the EDO?
PSIS.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, updates.
Well, the 288 on October 1 is tied to the state reporting for PSIS. The 285 that I'm showing as of January 1st is as a reporting from the schools to central office,
But
basically.
they're both actual this year numbers. There's no projecting going on.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
And on page 15, Angie?
Under the reading section, object code 51115, there's a $52,000 increase for remedial reading certified staff.
Yes.
Sorry, I missed what you said in the beginning. I apologize.
Under reading,
Second block from the bottom?
object code 51115, there's a $52,000 increase in remedial reading certified staff. Are we adding?
There was an additional FTE here currently that was not in the 18-19 budget.
Is it in the overview?
Yeah, I think up 1 minute, where are we?
Sarah Noble.
That's not, no, that wouldn't be the EL.
It's
Just a realignment, yeah, just give me a second, I can tell.
Somebody who was added this year?
It's a realignment within the buildings. Ms. Baldelli will have the,
I think it's an interventionist.
Yeah, we think it's the interventionist.
Reading, yep. Reading. We added an interventionist.
yeah, it's the interventionist.
We added a position, an interventionist position.
Okay, and where are those reflected in the budget? Like, because now it's 2.25 staff that I did not see reflected anywhere else in the budget, other than going through line
No,
by
they're
line.
they're currently there this year, so I see where the confusion is, the budget to budget. We're not adding somebody. So I previously had 3 reading specialists, now I have 2 reading specialists, 2 interventionists. That was an addition last year of 1 interventionist.
Last year, that interventionist position was somehow aligned to DOI, and it shouldn't have been there in the
Oh,
Department
you're
of
pulling it out of
Instruction.
other,
Okay,
So
so-
it came out of the Department of Instruction, got allocated where it should have been
Okay.
to Sarah
That-
Noble, so that's why you
that's-
see it there.
that's a
But this
very
is not
important
a
point.
new, is not
It's
a
not
new
a-
position.
Okay.
Because when you're looking at an overview.
Right.
And and you're seeing staff at, one full-time position being added, and we're peeling back all of these layers.
Right.
You
Yeah.
don't want to give the information that we're adding stuff when we're not.
Right.
All we're doing is realigning out of other areas. And I
Right.
think that's a really important
Yeah,
point,
if we
because
could-
I turned to
Absolutely.
Angie right away and said, it's not in the overview, so that didn't happen.
Yeah.
So
That's
I was
right,
like-
you're exactly right, that did not happen.
But it happened
Well-
for this year.
Right.
Yeah, so.
But if we're gonna see that reflected as a decrease in the DOI budget.
Right.
Okay, if there's any more of those,
We've
be
had.
appreciative
Yeah.
of knowing them in advance.
But that person is currently working in the school this year.
Currently, yeah, absolutely
will
not
Right,
continue
any
it's just
increase
from
in
one
position.
department
The
to
shift
another.
of where it's charged.
Exactly,
Right,
right. It was
fine.
previously charged to DOI and now is,
I know what you're saying.
You're gonna see that though a
You
lot
are, a
throughout
lot.
here, because we move them
All
all over,
around.
like whether it's
But
the
we should
school
flag
psychologists.
those, because on the face of it, it looks like we
Yeah,
missed
Helen
something.
Plain.
Right. I mean, if somebody were just looking through the budget,
That's
so
right.
it'd be
Right,
like, oh,
they'd
look,
say-
they added a
That's
position
right.
here, they added a position there. So we
Exactly.
really need to draw attention to that, because that's the kind of stuff you see on Facebook. They're adding 10 positions,
Right.
you know, we're not.
That's-
Right.
We're not.
Right.
And that's, goes
Yep.
back to the $147,000 increase. You look at that rate and go, whoa,
Yeah.
okay.
What's
You know,
happening?
So, exactly.
Right.
Okay,
Those are
we can
all
do that.
realignments. The only
Okay.
positions
And
being
we're-
added were overview.
Okay.
or-
Okay.
Fair enough.
That's two. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. And on page 16. And 17. Tammy?
Yes, in the library, 57500 furniture and fixtures, we're going from 1,000 to 2,500. I'm wondering what we're getting.
So that was one of the areas we went to June, and kind of sliced that down. And so, again, I've spoken a couple years in a row, this library was originally designed for almost like a high school mindset, that there would be much larger children working at tables and chairs with encyclopedias, taking notes perhaps. And so slowly over time, like by $2,500, to kind of migrate the furniture from larger children's size down to the children who are actually here, who are 8, 9, and 10, who sit on those wooden chairs behind us and slide off, dangle, all sorts of things, so.
So it's just adding age-appropriate furniture.
Exactly,
to the
and
school.
just by doing that a little bit over time, that, through that refresh line, we can kind of get more appropriate furniture.
Thank you.
And 18? Angie?
So I just want to point out that the very last line, this non-certified computer ed, that's where we are seeing that added back in from
That's
the
right.
previous two.
And that's
schools.
definitely a percentage that's gonna jump off the
Yeah.
page.
That's a perfect example.
That is a good example,
If you net out those
absolutely.
three numbers at those
Right.
three locations,
Exactly.
you'll see a percentage increase, you know, somewhere between 1 to
Okay.
3%.
And
I'm sorry,
and Tammy?
Just again, the furniture fixture line in the 57500 old
Yep.
school. Yeah.
The 218.6?
That's the one.
That's correct.
Same thing, so that was a area last year that we went to in the very, very late spring. But I believe strongly in presenting that line in that refresh mode. In 36 classrooms, like carpets are very, very important to elementary instruction right now. They do a lot of work on the carpet. If we wait to buy 35 carpets, we're gonna have a very large bill, but by refreshing the carpets every year. So in that line, there's carpets, there's a couple of standing desks, and also some skinning material, which is
Some what?
that, skinning material is that dry erase material that you put on a chalkboard that then turns it into a dry erase board. So same thing, a little bit at a time. Facilities, I buy the material, facilities puts it up, and it changes all those chalkboards to dry erase boards.
Am I to understand you have chalkboards?
Yes, there are still some places where there's, and again, like
With
that,
chalk?
5 years ago, we didn't buy all skinning materials. We've just done a handful of classrooms each year to get the building to dry erase boards over
Okay,
time.
can I just, then, while I'm here,
Yes.
how are you with smart boards then?
How are we with?
Smart boards?
With smart boards, you know, that's really, personally, I don't decide where the smart boards go.
No,
That
no,
would
no,
be Department
how
of
many are in
Technology.
the building?
How many are in the building?
Does every classroom have one?
Yeah, I'm missing Miss Pratt at this point. She could give me the exact,
Okay.
almost every teaching space has a smart board.
Okay.
And then there's a couple of places that we use for other events. where
Okay,
there's a
no, I
smart
was just
board.
confused because you were talking about dry erase as well, so. That's all.
Right,
Oh, there's both.
Oh, so you have both?
yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you. JT?
Page 18 at the top block there, the AV instructional supplies.
So a couple of things there. That is, some of the AV line from other areas went there, but for the most part, that $4,000 item is actually a projector for the multipurpose room. That as we move to projectors, that's kind of an underutilized space, that's a price to give a projector that is mounted on the ceiling and would make that space, the utility of the space would be better for presentations, when we have shows come in, when we're doing concerts, or Veterans Day was a good example. We do Veterans Day up there, and it also hooks into the current PA system that's up there. So it's a specific price from the vendor for that space that hooks into what's there.
And am I correct in assuming that there was no budget for that?
There was no budget for that, right, it's never,
this isn't
it
even like a
does,
realignment?
currently does not exist. We really go kind of old school and wheel up a projector.
Okay.
So this would eliminate that and plug into some of the existing infrastructure that's already there, like the PA system.
To make it, we have a cafetorium, right? Like,
Right.
Whereas that's a space, but that would be
That would be a
Probably
better,
a better space
better
for-
space sometimes to use, particularly because we still have 6 lunch waves. So when we use the cafetorium, that limits the times of days when we can do things and how many kids we can get in there. So having the space upstairs is a benefit.
Okay, thank you.
Page 19. Tammy?
In the sped line, 56500, we're going from 0 to 6,000. I'm just wondering what that is.
What line you on?
I believe that is the,
That's
Chromebooks.
AV.
Chromebooks.
those are Chromebooks.
Yep, those are
And you see the licenses are,
I'm technology director, so it may just be a matter of placing a call to see where they are with
Right,
that.
so it's a placeholder as of now, and
We
we
might
might
be
be
able
able
to
to
do
do,
better. We'll try.
Right.
do better.
Through all the budget, through all the pages in the budget, if you see a Chromebook that's
Right.
budgeted at $250, whereas that number might come down around to $200.
Right.
And each license is in there for $30, when I think in the last purchasing agreement we had, it was down to $27
Right,
per.
so, okay, but we can explore those.
Absolutely.
Okay, in the
Eileen?
speech section, there's a 24,000